Good morning. Finding light in the darkness, that's a tall order. And this darkness that I'm talking about isn't just the darkness, the little darkness. It's the big stuff. And what I mean by the big stuff is, a friend of mine, I heard last night, was diagnosed with cancer. And we were at dinner together, and he was telling me about it, and he was talking about, it just blindsided him. It's like if you were to imagine the eclipse of the sun, if you've never seen an eclipse of the sun, and all of a sudden your day becomes dark, and you don't know why, and you look up in this, and where did the sun go? And it's like, this is strange, my whole life has been disoriented. This is the kind of the darkness that St. John of the Cross talked about, when everything that you're standing on all of a sudden gets shaky, that there's no solid ground to really anchor into anymore. Your faith, your trust in what you thought was real starts to dissolve. And this can be brought on by grief, a loss of a loved one, a diagnosis, betrayal by a friend. It can be brought on by all kinds of things. But when this darkness hits, it's tough and it sucks. And I went online taking a look at, and I put in finding light in the darkness. And I came up with all kinds of YouTubes and things like this, and I started to watch him, and I said, this is all cheesy crap. This doesn't touch when I'm in physical pain, and someone says, well, just go ahead and meditate. Oh, get out of here. I can't even hold still, it hurts so bad, and I'm going to try to, no, I'm sorry. When we're in pain, and it doesn't matter if it's physical or psychological. Let's say you have a broken leg. You know that's going to heal. And so it can be painful and annoying, but you know it's going to heal. When you have a broken heart, that kind of pain is just as palpable and perhaps even worse because you don't know if it's ever going to heal or not. And so I want to talk a little bit about pain, and then the story we tell about the pain. And that's where the real suffering comes in. We're never going to escape this life without having a lot of pain. And we don't know when it's going to happen or where it's going to happen or how it's going to show up. But there's no escaping it. The trick is how do we endure it? And what I mean by enduring it, how do we kind of like accept it, let it be, and continue forward, even in the midst of it? And that's the tricky part. And that's where it takes that little bit of light or something to hold on to in the darkness. And what I know about the darkness is the tunnel between one reality and the next reality. Think of it kind of like it's a transformation. And during the time in the tunnel is the unknown port, and it's the thread that guides us from one point in our lives to the next point in our lives. And this darkness is transformational. And there is gold and there is wisdom to be gained by being in the darkness. And it sucks. And I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I'm wise enough now not to take it away from others because it's important. Childbirth. Now, I witnessed a 26-hour childbirth of my first son. And it was amazing to watch Susan go through that. I was exhausted. I can only imagine the other side of it. Poor Susan. It was like, okay, the next contraction. Okay, can we make it through this one? And so we have this, how do we first off, in childbirth, there's an ending to it. And so you're sort of, you can count on that ending. There is a definite time when this is going to be over. There's other kinds of darkness where you don't know, where the pain is there and it continues. The Nelson Mandelas of 27 years in prison and in darkness and in suffering. What kept him alive in the midst of all of that was that thread that was helping him through that dark tunnel from one transformational point in his life to the next. Darkness has a way of humbling us, of turning us into mush, so that we can be reborn on the other side with a clearer, more resilient, more loving human being. This is the possibility. Suffering tenderizes us. And if you think of the caterpillar, that chubby little guy with all the legs just chewing and enjoying life and eating all those leaves and has no idea that there will come a time when he will die to what he knows is real. Not a clue. And then there comes a time when he starts weaving this cocoon around himself, or herself, or whatever that is. And at that point, not knowing what's going to happen. And then there comes a time when the caterpillar disappears as a caterpillar. And this is what happens in that dark tunnel, is hopefully in the dark tunnel, if we're lucky, we let go of our story. We let go of who we think we are, and we take a look at something that's a little bit better image, a little bit different. We trust in the intelligence within us. We're born with this intelligence. We're born with this inner sense of knowing. And the question is, are we listening? Can we feel it? And when we're in pain, when I'm in pain, I have a hard time feeling it. I have a hard time remembering that I have made it through every bit of darkness previously. Why is this different? You know, I've been dealing with a bout of back pain, and I'm going, oh my goodness, this brings me right back. Why am I dealing with this again? I thought this was over. And I was talking to my friend Daryl about all of this, and he's my spiritual director. Because he tells me, he says, you know, frankly, I just don't give a shit. And with that attitude, he's got something there. You know, what if we were to not care as much as we do about trying to get better and to improve and all of that? What if we were to simply exhale into the moment? Because the inhale is, I'm ready to go into life. The exhale is, I'm ready to let go and relax. What if we were to exhale into the middle of our suffering and to say, I just give up and I give it over? Not to Jesus, not to some idea, but to the infinite intelligence that I am. What if I were simply to relax into it, trusting that there is something within me that knows how to heal, that has always healed in the past, and that will heal again this time. And to let go of the idea that I need to know what the future and when it's going to happen. And so Daryl says, well, you know, remember back in the 70s when those Greenpeace warriors would go up against those huge ships? And they would save whales, and they'd come back and they'd celebrate their big victory, and we'd give them money, and it was great. What happened? Well, they're still working out there, but you can't take your eye off the prize. Nelson Mandela, for 27 years, didn't take his eye off the prize. There's something about the resilience that it takes when you're in the darkness. It's like you can celebrate small victories, but you have to stay vigilant. You save one whale, and then you save another, and you continue, and you continue, and you continue. And when I find myself in darkness, I have to cultivate that resilience of taking a look at, well, what's today bringing? How can I get through today? With the pain that I'm experiencing, how can I get through today? Now, my mind's going to say, I'm too depressed to go on. It hurts too much. I don't want to do it. I just don't want to do it. And then I'll talk to myself. I'll say, hey, you can be miserable doing nothing, or you can be miserable doing something. What's it going to be? Oh, okay, I'll do something. And if I do something, anything, what happens? I become engaged. I start to shift my focus. I start to enjoy myself, and I forget about my back pain. I forget about the darkness that I'm in. And I'm actually engaged for a while. And I get a gap. And I live for those gaps when I am lost in what I'm actually doing in the moment. And so when we find that thread in the darkness, to dispel the darkness is actually going into action of some sort where we lose ourselves, where we forget our story about how bad the darkness is. And it's almost as simple as that. Now, there's lots of ways of distracting ourselves. People can distract. We can distract with drugs. We can distract with risky behavior. We can distract with a lot of different things. But if we return to the exhale and we ask in the midst of the exhale, what is mine to do? What is it that really, what's this really all about? What is this pain teaching me? And does it need to continue? And to continue asking these questions. Right now, we're in the darkest time I know of in this country in terms of the cruelty that's being perpetuated on this country by its leader. The cruelty that's being perpetuated by several other leaders. The Ukrainian war, actually it's the war of Russian aggression. The Palestinian crisis, which is the war on the genocide perpetuated by Israel. And it's what's happening in this country. The war that's being perpetuated on immigrants and on the civility of common decency. And I find myself very disturbed by this. And I find if I don't watch it, I can get very depressed. But I found something that actually works, this thread through the darkness, because this is the transformational tunnel that we're in this country. Hopefully, when we end this transformational period, maybe we'll stop fighting the Civil War, the war against black people. And what I've found is that if I do something, just something, it helps. And other than signing petitions, what I've discovered really works for me is to protest. And Susan and I, every Saturday from 11 to 12, we have a spot on a corner, and 12 of us show up. And we have a big old sign that goes all the way down, "No Kings." And Susan will have a sign saying, big sign saying, "No Dictators." And we'll have our placards, big placards saying, "No Kings," or "Dump Trump," or whatever. And we'll wave. And what happens in that, and I look forward to this, it lightens my whole day, and I stand out there with a big placard and waving to the cars, and over 2,000 cars in an hour go by this place. And when they stop at the light, I get to look into the eyes of each person. And almost universally, people will either honk or give a thumbs up or a little peace sign or some kind of acknowledgement. And I am elevated. And I nod and I thank you and yes and keep up the good work and all of this encouragement. And I'm uplifted. These are the hands in the tunnel of darkness that we can hold as we walk each other through this darkness together. And by holding each other's hands, by making that connection, by protesting, it's really not about protesting, it's about connecting in love of an idea. And I find myself no longer alone, and I'm energized, and I can endure the darkness. So what does it take to find light in the darkness? It's almost as simple as finding another hand to share in the darkness, to stable ourselves in the darkness. In closing, you've got to touch on gratitude, because gratitude is when we call that forward, when we drop into gratitude, when we embrace it, when we call it, however you want to talk about it, when we exhale into it. We'll do a little exercise in a minute. When we exhale into it, something happens. It's kind of like rebooting the computer. All the sort of the junk, and it starts, I use my computer, my little iPad starts to get really weird. And if I shut it down, and I'll call that the exhale, if I shut it down and boot it back up, it's crisp and clean again. And this is what gratitude can do. If we can exhale into gratitude. Let's try that right now. Take an inhale. I'm inhaling life. It's good. And then I'm going to exhale and let it go and relax in appreciation, deep appreciation. And again, I inhale this life just as it is, and I exhale the gratitude for everything that has been given. Everything. Including the suffering and the pain. Including the joy and the celebration. And as I drop into being grateful for this life, exactly the way it is, I know that more will be given. Of this peace, of this quiet that I know when I'm in this place of deep appreciation and reverence for this very life. And so I take another big inhale of life, and then I let it go again, knowing that this is the dance of light and dark. And we learn from both. This is my prayer, and I let it be, and so it is.